what new cryptography can we do using quantum computers? The field of properly quantum cryptography almost didn't exist 5 years ago. There's so much cool work that's coming out in the area. Proving the security of crypto systems is very, very hard. One of the big proposals got broken a couple years ago. This was really, really influential paper describing the 5 worlds of complexity versus cryptography. If we live in a world where no cryptography exists, we get all sorts of really, really cool benefits in solving these complexity problems, and particularly actually in machine learning. No cryptography means really, really good learning. There's a new math problem that we didn't think we could solve that we can now solve. What Turing showed is that it doesn't matter how many superclusters you have, there's going to be some programs that I can send you that you're not going to be able to solve. Programs and proofs are kind of the same thing. Quantum computers might be able to help us with metacomplexity problems. That would be really surprising. You would live in a world where quantum computers can break any crypto that's being done by classical agents. We would need a breakthrough that's not in computer science. We would need a breakthrough of philosophy. This gives you absolutely unbreakable cryptography. The fact that this works is wild to me. You would only need one of these near-term quantum computers. Me and some collaborators had what we thought was an approach for breaking these. A lot of our classical intuitions don't help us. They're this fundamentally new way of getting the world to do computation and cognition for us. That feels like evidence for we live in a simulation and someone's screwing with us.
Hello, I'm Maria Villaris. Welcome back to the Quantum Foundations podcast. Today I'm joined by Matthew Gray, who is a third-year PhD student here at the University of Oxford in the Computer Science department. Today we're going to be talking about the area of how quantum meets cryptography and complexity theory, which is the area of Matthew's PhD research. So I look forward to learning all about how these areas all fit together. And yeah, let's get started by, I'd like to find out a bit about how you ended up getting interested in these areas and ending up doing research in them before we dive into what they actually are and how they fit together.
Yeah. So my background was in sort of classical, a little bit of classical cryptography, a little bit of classical security, and classical complexity theory. Sort of these classical complexity theory in particular being very much downstream of Turing's original work defining computational mathematical models of what computation is. Like how can we reason about computation? These sort of, at least initially, were very much derived from the computers of his day, which were people. Sort of during this sort of era, you would have hundreds or dozens of people sort of going through and doing these calculations in a very mechanical way and passing them along. And he created sort of a mathematically formal way, not of just describing a particular calculation that people might do, but sort of these formalized methods of calculation overall.
And this was your interest kind of pre-PhD?
Pre-PhD and sort of, in undergrad, or sort of like early in undergrad. Sort of by the end of undergrad, I'd sort of moved over into sort of quantum, sort of thinking about quantum complexity, because, quantum computation is sort of, in some ways, the most exciting thing that's happened in almost 100 years of sort of complexity and computational models, because it's the first model that is like truly profoundly different from what the things that Turing was originally studying, these people. Quantum computers can do things fundamentally differently in a fundamentally different manner than humans ever could. The whole trick of quantum computation is to sort of take advantage of these properties of quantum mechanics, entanglement and superposition, to carry out computations in superposition, sort of doing both or many computations sort of all at the same time, having them interfere with each other sort of constructively or destructively, and getting answers out at the other end, which is a thing that like a normal person just can't do. Like me sitting down at the blackboard and working some set of equations out, like I can't do that in superposition. Like, multiverse notwithstanding, certainly even in multiverse, me and my multiversal clones aren't going to be able to collaborate at the end and bring our answers back together in some sort of way. And so coming from a computational models standpoint, the sort of introduction of quantum computing, now that we're sort of several decades in, the beginnings of quantum computing to be actually realizable, like we're starting to build these things, is just incredibly exciting from this sort of theorist point of view. So that's sort of how I got into quantum computing. Sort of on that side, the route into quantum cryptography, partly it's the area of complexity theory and computational models that I'm most excited about are its interactions with cryptography. But then secondarily, quantum computing, one of the primary reasons that people are excited about it is because of its interaction with cryptography and its sort of power, particularly originally as an adversary in a cryptographic setting. So should I talk more about that, or
yeah, we can get onto that. And yeah, it's interesting that you kind of put this split of like people and computers on one side and quantum computers on the other.
Yeah.
I think people would normally think like people, computers, including quantum computers.
Yeah, and this is I think a very normal way of thinking about it. It's just we've forgotten, like this is sort of part of the lexicon that's sort of fallen apart, that like the original computers were us.
Yeah. But we weren't the original quantum.
But we're not the original quantum computers, and we sort of fundamentally can't be. Like, you know, in a weird way, we have much more in common with the computers that we currently have than the computers we might have in, 10, 20, 50, 100 years. Like these are going to be sort of doing something fundamentally different than, the kinds of computations that humans have been doing, dating all the way back to Mesopotamia and Egypt and land surveying and geometry. And like, it's a fundamentally different thing. And I find that, at least personally and philosophically, very exciting.
Yeah,
it
was cool. So so there's these three areas. There's like quantum tech and quantum computing, cryptography and complexity theory, and they all kind of come together in your interests and in your work. Yeah. So so maybe we can start by expanding a bit more on the quantum computing side, as you were kind of just talking about, and then we can see kind of then move on to the other areas and figure out how they fit together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about the quantum computing part of this jigsaw?
Okay, like.
So I guess the cryptography, the cryptographic relevance of quantum computing.
Quantum computing. Yeah, for sure. So this is maybe a slightly unfair or like overly strong thing to say, because people are interested in quantum computing, and governments and institutions are interested in quantum computing for other reasons besides this. But at least as far as I understand things, like the main driving reason why we've seen the sort of investment into quantum computing as a technology that we've seen in the last couple decades. Part of it is just it sounds really cool. Like it's easier to get grant applications and get government funding for things that sound really cool and sexy. If you're out there and want to, you can do a quick little research dive into something called dynamic computing. It got that name specifically because it sounded cool and would play well to Congress and be an easier job of getting funding. It's not a particularly informative name, but it was good for getting funding. So part of the reason quantum computing gets money is it sounds cool and it's got all this sort of philosophical interest that I was sort of just talking about. The key reason why people who are a little bit more hard-nosed are still thinking that this is a very good use of money, despite it billions of dollars at this point having been sort of funneled into it as a technology, and it's still not sort of having thrown off all that much value, is because of one particular use case that was laid out by Peter Shor in a series of works that are sort of referred to as Shor's algorithm. And what this showed is that you could use quantum computers and quantum algorithms to break some of the main versions of classical cryptography. And sort of specifically you could break RSA and Diffie-Hellman. We might talk more about sort of what those are. But these are sort of two of the main tools used for secure communication over the web, and have been now for several decades. They're starting to get phased out as concerns about sort of quantum computers coming online and being able to break them have been raised. Yeah, as an adversary, like quantum computers, sort of we know for sure are quite powerful and are able to do things that we didn't think classical computers could do. And so,
with adversary being the kind of the terms for
the person who's trying to break the crypto, sort of, you can imagine like the two of us are communicating, trying to communicate securely. You, our dear viewer, are the adversary. You're trying to listen in. We're talking gobbledygook. You want to know what we're talking about. And if you have a quantum computer, you're going to be able to break the sort of premier cryptographic tools that have been used for the last couple decades. That were, in fact, like, not to go too deep down a rabbit hole, but like the introduction of and sort of publication of RSA in particular was fought against by governments because it was seen as too powerful, too secure, and governments, the US government, wanted to be able to listen to our communications, and so didn't want this. And if the US government had had a quantum computer back in the 1970s, 80s, they wouldn't have minded. The introduction of RSA, that would not have been a problem for them.
So the thing that the government thought was too secure is actually vulnerable to
quantum computers. Yeah. Now, sort of, so that's sort of the initial interest in quantum computing from a cryptographic standpoint. In some ways, so then the problem that gets raised by that is, can you create sort of cryptographic schemes that allow the two of us to communicate securely, even in a world with quantum computers? And at least under current theory, we think that's a solved problem. Not without getting too deep into the weeds, but in cryptography, proving something secure is really, really hard. And the basic reason for this is you have to prove that something is secure against every possible adversary. So you're sort of the form of one of these theorems. So like this scheme is secure. The form of this is for all possible programs, computer programs that could be used to run against this, they're not going to work terribly well. And proofs of this kind, because it's a for all statement about computer programs, get very, very, very tricky and self-referential, basically because computer programs can be thought about as proofs. And so you can get the computer programs to start talking about proofs about the computer programs, about proofs about the computer programs, and everything gets crazy. We can start, that's maybe getting too deep into complexity land to talk about sort of the ways that this practically manifests. But in sort of our day-to-day world, what this means is proving the security of crypto systems is very, very hard. The way that you tend to go about doing it is you say, okay, if I could crack this crypto system, then I could crack some sort of fundamental basic math problem that we think should be really hard. And then sort of people attack that fundamental hard math problem for decades. Nobody comes up with a way to beat it. And then you say, okay, we did it. And then somebody, in the case of these RSA and Diffie-Hellman ones, they're sort of based on this problem called prime factorization. People thought it was secure for a long time, and then somebody came up with an algorithm, a quantum algorithm for doing it. And now we're getting close to having quantum computers. And people are like, oh no.
So the logic is like, we have the problem that we want to show nothing can solve it efficiently.
Yeah.
We show that problem is the same difficulty as a maths problem.
Yes.
And then if there's no good solutions for attacking that maths problem, we conclude there's no good solutions for our problem. If something does come along which can hack the maths problem, then it can also hack our problem and any other ones that depend on that.
Exactly.
Or that are in the same kind of classes as that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is sort of how this is all put together. And it leads to a funny situation where we rely on these cryptographic systems because they sure seem to be secure. A lot of incredibly smart people have been thinking about them for a very, very long time, and they haven't figured it out. But we don't know. There's a chance that everything's broken. And there's a chance that the governments, know about it. They certainly wouldn't have told us if they had backdoors into all the things. They'd be keeping that on the DL.
Yeah, so it's not kind of beyond possibility that there exists a way of efficiently solving these problems. It's just that we've tried really hard over many years.
And there's a lot of incentives for somebody having figured it out. First off, there's all of the shady incentives of if you figure this out, you can read everybody's mail and do bad things. But then there's also coming up with this with an algorithm that efficiently a classical algorithm that would break RSA as opposed to a quantum algorithm. That's Turing Award. Tenure at whatever university you want to go to, potentially. This would be very, very, very good for your career.
And you want to know that, from a defensive perspective, you want to know that you're secure using it as well.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. So you would do this. Yeah, there's also a bit of a question mark of okay, if you came up with one of these things, maybe the correct strategy is to go let all of the big tech companies who rely on this and go talk to them, go talk to the government, give them, maybe they pay you, maybe they don't. I don't know if this would count, whether this would be considered mathematical blackmail. I have no idea. I'm not necessarily recommending this. This is not legal advice. If you crack RSA, talk to a lawyer first. But you could, if you're willing to be a little bit shady, you could probably rack in a couple $1 million and then get tenure at whatever university you want.
Yeah, you'd probably get much more from the fame of
yeah, totally. That's speaking engagements for the rest of your life, potentially.
Yeah.
So all of that sort of comes together to a reasonably strong belief that these problems are secure. Although there's a bit of a funny story there. So, okay. So this is sort of the general theory of cryptography. When we're thinking about post-quantum cryptography specifically, we're then interested in sort of these, so post-quantum cryptography being, again, we're communicating and we want this to be secure against you or your viewer with your quantum computer. So you can listen in and do quantum computation. We both have just normal computers and we're communicating over the internet. So in cases like this, what we want is for this to be some sort of problem that's expressible classically. It's something about, numbers, integers, whatever, that is, we have good reason to believe is hard for quantum computers. And this could just be in the case of the problems we're most interested in, it's either they're very unstructured and quantum computers mostly have to take advantage of structure to be able to do the the constructive and destructive interference. The sort of, I feel like the really good metaphor for this is the two-slit experiment, where you sort of have these the different paths sort of focusing in on particular areas. Quantum computing is kind of like that, where you sort of are doing a whole bunch of different computations sort of all in parallel, and then you sort of structure them in such a way that the ones that you interfere constructively, and you get sort of a bright light on the area, on the answer, and you get sort of darkness in the areas where the paths interact destructively and they sort of all disappear. Being able to do this, to set this sort of computation up, requires that the problem be very structured. So that you can set this up so that the things interfere in the way that you want. So either you have problems that are very, very unstructured, or you have problems that sort of reduce to math problems that we have some other sort of independent reason for believing might be hard for quantum computing. Again, at the end of the day, it then also ends up being it's very unstructured. It sort of ends up being the core depth.
Yeah. So you either kind of look for this general property of being unstructured, or kind of some specific maths problems that are difficult.
Yeah.
Known to be difficult.
Thought to be.
Even with quantum computers.
We don't know that anything's difficult.
Okay.
This is
thought to be.
Thought to be. This is sort of, again, we don't, this is sort of, it's always the embarrassing thing about computational complexity and cryptography is we know so little.
Yeah.
All these papers come out and some of them are sort of these unconditional results. This sort of this works. And this is secure. or this is hard. But it's getting those unconditional results about things that we genuinely care about is very hard. And so those papers come out less frequently than papers that are of the form assuming something, then something else. Like assuming this problem is hard, then we can get these sorts of results and behaviors that we want. But it's like that's where most of the actual benefit, like those are the papers that actually give us tools that we care about. Typically, a lot of the really unstructured, or the really unconditional stuff tends to be weaker results, and are also just sort of generically harder to get. So this is these problems are thought to be hard. They unfortunately are not known to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this field of post-quantum cryptography, which is aimed at finding these problems, making sure that, to the best of our knowledge, they are hard for quantum computers, also for classical ones. It has to be for both now.
Yes. And this is actually sort of, if you prove that they're hard for quantum computers, the model of computation that we use to sort of describe quantum computers, it can do everything a classical computer does. So proving security against quantum computers, or, coming to believe in security against quantum computers sort of on its own implies security against classical computers. So luckily we don't have to prove both of those things separately. We get to just attack the quantum adversary.
Yeah, so you can't be
post-quantum, but you can't be post-quantum but vulnerable to classical. That's sort of not a situation.
You can't be not vulnerable to quantum but vulnerable to
classical. Yeah, that's not a situation. So there's a lot of negatives running around, but I think we got there.
Just trying to get it the right run. Okay.
So this is the world of sort of post-quantum cryptography. It's a very exciting world. We have a couple good candidates. And we've had a bunch of other candidates that have been proposed, a fair number of which then get broken. There's been I think there's this whole world of isogeny-based post-quantum crypto, and I think one of the big proposals in that area got broken a couple years ago in a way that was very exciting and distressing for people working in the area. And then this last spring, the premier post-quantum crypto assumption is something called learning with errors, or post-quantum crypto scheme is called learning with errors. And there was a very exciting moment this last spring or was it last spring or the spring before? Yeah, last spring. This last spring where somebody put out a paper claiming to have broken learning with errors. And I had the entertaining experience of giving a talk during the week where it had come out, but before people had found the mistake. And my talk was about one of these conditional results where I was assuming learning with errors is secure, we can prove this other thing. And we had to give the talk in the middle of assuming learning with errors is secure, and this paper that just came out is wrong, which it did turn out to be, luckily for that publication, my publication. Although, I don't know, it's one of these things sort of having this world of cryptography where we have these schemes that are based on the hardness of other problems. Part of what's really philosophically exciting about that and enjoyable about that as a setup is you're sort of put in a win-win position, because either you get to live in a world where this system is secure, in which case you have cryptography, happy good times, or you live in a world where this thing is not secure, in which case you can break the underlying assumption. There's a new math problem that we didn't think we could solve that we can now solve. And learning with errors is there's a bunch of reasons why it would be very exciting if we could do learning with errors. So sort of all this lattice-based, these lattice problems that we could end up solving. And this sort of has potentially implications in areas like coding theory, and it would be awesome. This would be a good world to live in. Although a slightly scary world, because then we wouldn't have any really top-notch quantum post-quantum crypto assumptions as we get closer and closer to quantum computers coming online. So mixed blessings.
I hadn't actually thought about that, because I guess if you can run Shor's algorithm, you can factor prime numbers, but I hadn't really thought of being able to do those problems as actually really nice, positive in itself.
Yeah, totally. It is. Like
It's like that's like an exciting thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, so like at least on the being a computer scientist and a complexity theorist, like we care about what math problems humans can solve, and like the more we can solve, the better. Again, this being sort of the joy of the way that we set up cryptography is even if we end up living in a world where these specific crypto systems don't exist, that's not pure downside. We get something out of it. And this is sort of, okay, I'm going to allow myself to dive very, very shallowly into this. But it turns out that if we live in a world where no cryptography exists, like where none of these sort of, the only things that exist are the things that we can currently prove unconditionally. If we live in that world, we get all sorts of really, really cool benefits in sort of solving these complexity problems, and particularly actually in machine learning. Suddenly we can do all sorts of really, really cool learning things if we live in a world where cryptography doesn't exist. In some sense, you can think of learning and cryptography even as being like dual problems, where cryptography is, can you hide information? And learning being, can you discover information? Can you find the hidden structure in the world? And so if we live in a world without cryptography, suddenly we have formal ways of showing that no cryptography means really, really good learning. So like,
cool.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better about a world where we break cryptography.
Yeah, there's huge upsides.
Yeah.
It's funny, but sort of there's sort of this really, really influential paper by Russell and Pagliazzo describing sort of the 5 worlds of complexity versus cryptography. That sort of look at sort of, instead of thinking about specific problems, they're looking at sort of, instead of like these specific protocols like learning with errors, it's sort of these abstractions. So learning with errors allows you to do, for instance, public key crypto. So you can think of public key crypto as an abstract cryptographic form. So like you can imagine sort of anything that can do this. And sort of there's the question of, okay, does public key encryption exist? Is there something that can implement this? So you start thinking about these in terms of abstractions, and then you sort of lay out sort of all the different possible trade-offs between how strong, like how good crypto exists, and how good we are at doing computation. Like what are the hardest math problems that we can solve? Sort of, you can sort of scale these back and forth and say, okay, we can solve all the math problems we care about. Life is amazing. Sadly, no crypto exists, but everything's wonderful. And the sort of the world where crypto doesn't exist, but the only thing that we get from that is just that it doesn't exist. We don't sort of assume anything extra. In that paper, this world was called Pessyland because it was this terrible world where if we have no crypto, but we don't get any extra algorithmic stuff. Yeah. It's really, in the last couple of years, this sort of world has been resuscitated, and sort of talked up as being this wonderland for learning, and sort of having all of these other cool things. And sort of in my world, in Pessyland, you can do metacomplexity. These sort of really fundamental, complex computational problems that are about complexity, the complexity of other problems. These problems turn out to be, in most cases, quite easy in this world where crypto doesn't exist. So this is sort of, and these characterizations are like the core of my research. This is what I really care about, is sort of this sort of stuff around how does metacomplexity, like what sort of metacomplexity benefits do we get in a world without cryptography, and or what sort of cryptographic benefits do we get in a world where these metacomplexity problems are hard. So this is sort of, so really, really looking at this trade-off right on the border of like, when does crypto exist or not, and sort of what does that mean about our computational power?
Right. So you're looking into these 2 possible worlds.
Yeah, essentially. Although the worlds get more complicated once we throw quantum computers into the mix. But sort of, yes, we're looking at sort of this boundary between the worlds, these sort of trade-offs.
And there's this type of problem, which is the metacomplexity problems, which are like the complexity of complexity. Yeah,
so a metacomplexity problem, a really classic example of a metacomplexity problem is minimum circuit size. So this would be sort of how many, like, what is given the metacomplexity problem is given some string, some, like, the text of a book, something, what is the smallest possible circuit that could generate this text? What's the smallest little computer program, essentially, that could sort of generate this thing? This can be thought of as, in some ways, a question about compression. Like, how much sort of duplication is there in the book that you can take advantage of to squish down into this very small circuit? And so,
Right.
yeah, so this is, yeah.
So kind of in the sense that if the whole book was just one letter, then you could write a program.
Yeah.
That's just like, repeat this letter, and
Totally.
it's very short, because it's just like
Yeah,
this
exactly.
short instruction. Whereas if it's like a complex novel, then
It's much.
the program for that might actually just be like all the letters of the novel.
So this is actually part of the thing, is that it wouldn't be, because there's a lot of structure in the English language. Like, for the incompressible strings are basically pure randomness. There's just like, there's no structure in there. But, in the English language, there's a lot of, the word "the" is going to be repeating a lot. And so long as you didn't just like flip coins to randomly generate your novel, which I personally would find to not be a particularly good read, but you do you, dear readers. But yeah, sort of the novels that we actually enjoy reading are generally going to at least have a fair amount of compression, although not as much as something like the letter A, or the word the. These things are much more compressible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the problem is like taking some novel, for example, and then saying, well, this will just program that I can produce it with, and that's an example of a
metacomplexity problem.
Right. And what makes it meta?
What is the meta?
How could I see them?
Yeah. So the reason that these have been called metacomplexity problems is what you're typically doing when you're looking at one of these problems is you're thinking about the complexity of this problem. So you're thinking about this problem computationally is interested in the complexity of these other objects. And then when you're thinking about the complexity of the problem that is concerned with the complexity of other problems, you're doing metacomplexity. You're doing like multiple layers of complexity.
So, maybe we just briefly arrive what complexity is.
Okay. Okay, so complexity theory. I'm gonna, if you're all right with this, I'm gonna go back and ground with this in Turing, because hard eyes at Turing, and having characters, I feel like, makes these things easier to follow. So Turing formally defined this sort of mathematical model of what a computer is. And the reason that he did this was to show that one of these, that there's this problem that sort of, you can think of as being a philosophy problem. You can think of as being a computational problem. And he came up with this to show that this problem was impossible, that this problem was unsolvable. Sort of the way that this tends to get framed in modern discussions is the problem is called, in modern discussions, is called the halting problem. And this is this question of, the computational problem is, given some program, can you tell me whether or not this program is going to halt, or if it's going to run forever? And what Turing showed is that you can't, this is an unsolvable problem. This is computationally feasible. It doesn't matter how much power you have. It doesn't matter how many superclusters you have. You're screwed. Like, there is going to be some programs that I can send you that you're not going to be able to solve. And this gets back actually to this sort of point that I was talking about at the beginning, where the basic problem is that programs and proofs are kind of the same thing. And so you can get programs, you can come up with programs that can talk about themselves, and you can get proofs that talk about themselves, and everything gets screwy, and you can sort of build in some impossibilities. It turns out that this trick is basically equivalent to Gödel's trick in his, what's it called? Incompleteness. Yeah, there's actually a direct isomorphism. It's basically the same trick. And the ultimate trick is figuring out how to make either mathematics in the case of Gödel, or a computer in the case of Turing, say, sort of have a program or a piece of mathematics that fundamentally says this sentence is a lie. And once you're able to do this, everything, you're just like, okay. In the case of Turing, sort of, you get to a place where you're like, I figured out a way to basically get this to say this sentence is a lie, or sort of this program both halts and doesn't halt. And clearly that's ridiculous. So therefore my assumption that there is some thing that is able to compute the halting problem can't be true. And sort of in Gödel's case, it's like, clearly there is no, there's no way to sort of like there are some true statements in mathematics that don't have proofs. So for every formal system, there's true statements about mathematics that don't have proofs. Or the system of mathematics has other fundamental problems. Anyway, sorry, that may have been a little bit too technical. Sorry.
So the takeaway is that Turing showed that there
Yes.
has to be some problems that won't halt.
There are some computer programs that not only won't halt, but you can't tell whether they halt or not.
Right.
Yeah. And there actually probably are also sort of, I think you could probably get the quantifiers right to say something along the lines of, for any program that's trying to show whether programs halt or not, that stops in some specific amount of time, there exists a problem that is going to halt at some point in the far future that this program can't tell whether or not it halts.
Right. That's kind of how it's proven that
Yeah.
it can't exist.
Yeah. So this is sort of, so what Turing did is he showed that certain problems are uncomputable. So just like you can't do them, period, end of story. It doesn't matter how much power you have, you're screwed. And this is sort of computability theory. Complexity theory sort of follows this up with the question of, instead of, okay, there are some problems that we know we can't solve. Of the rest of the and there's some problems that we know we can solve because we've come up with solutions for them. Complexity theory is sort of, okay, so for these problems that we don't know whether or not we can solve in a reasonable amount of time, how should we think about them? Are these problems that we can solve efficiently? Or are there problems that we can prove require sort of have high complexity? So solving these problems requires either a large amount of memory or a large amount of time or some other resource. One of the things that would be really cool, and this is a complexity theory problem, are there any math problems that you really need quantum computers to solve? They're like just not solvable by classical computers. You really do need a quantum computer to solve them. And again, like I said earlier, like complexity theory is really hard because it's all of these for all statements. Like for every possible program that could be trying to solve this problem, we have to show that it fails. But this is what complexity theory is interested in, is sort of figuring out, can we say anything about the amount of resources that certain problems require? And one of the sort of ways that you can frame this is how much sort of resource cubing size of the program does a novel require? Like what is the actual sort of ultimate complexity of this? How much information truly is there in this novel, and how much could you squish that down?
Right. Yeah. So there's this task of trying to compress the novel.
Yeah.
And there's a complexity theory problem of how much can the novel be squished, compressed.
And so that's
or in meta.
Yeah. So okay. So like the problem. So the what's it called? So thinking about how much it can be squished, this is a complexity problem. And now you ask the question, how hard is it to compute the minimum size of the novel?
Right. So computing the minimum size is itself a complexity problem.
Yeah.
And then you're asking, how hard is it to solve that complexity problem?
Yeah.
Which is itself a complexity problem.
Yes.
And this is why it's meta complexity problem.
Yes.
Right. I see.
Okay. Sorry if that was too long of a tangent for
it was a question. Yeah. I think I hadn't made that distinction of the complexity of doing the compression and the complexity of figuring out how difficult it is to
figure out how much compression you can do. Yeah, so it's a bit of a trip.
So what's the answer?
How
difficult is it to compress but to figure out how to compress.
Yeah, so it's the shortest possible answer is, I don't know. Complexity theory is hard. We don't know. That is maximally compressed compared to this question. I can give much more. I can give a lot more information, sort of, if I'm given more time. The next sort of answer is sort of without introducing necessarily too much detail about what this means. It's definitely within the complexity class NP, which stands for non-deterministic polynomial time, which is sort of one of these central objects of complexity theory. We care about it a lot. So if you were able to create a machine that can sort of run this, like can compute problems in NP, then you could do most of these metacomplexity problems. Not all of them. There's it turns out that like the hardest ones, like the Alpin problem, are actually uncomputable. The hardest metacomplexity problems, not NCSP. MCSP is an NP. There's another one called Kolmogorov complexity, and the Kolmogorov complexity, which is that one's more about what's the length of the shortest program as opposed to the smallest circuit. Kolmogorov complexity is uncomputable in the worst case. And then getting even more of an answer, most of these problems, if you're, instead of thinking about like, okay, in the worst case, so given like really, really, really hard specific ones, you're interested in the question of, okay, you want to solve this over some known distribution. Like there's a sort of, you're getting these instances of the problem from somebody and you know how they're generating them. It turns out that in that instance, and in that setting, being able to solve these problems most of the time is exactly as hard as breaking all crypto. Like these are exactly equivalent. If you're able to solve Kolmogorov complexity in some of these other ones, you're on average, then you can break cryptography. And if you can break cryptography, then you can solve these problems on average.
Right, cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can kind of put them in the same group, but if you manage to do one of them,
you could do
that. It shouldn't be done as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
And that's part of what's wild there is, again, like one of those problems that you can solve efficiently if you can break all crypto on average is Kolmogorov complexity. And it's wild that Kolmogorov complexity goes from being, in the worst case, it's literally unsolvable. Like this is just an uncomputable problem. You can't do it. But when you go from worst case, like you want to solve it in the worst case to, you can do it most of the time in practice, sort of that jump. It goes from being infinite, like literally impossible to, only as hard as breaking all cryptography. It's the photos, which is still very hard. But like much, 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 much less hard. Like that's we could live in a world where we can break all cryptography. I don't know.
But not one where we can do the worst case.
No, that's not something that computers can do. We would need a breakthrough that's not in like computer science. We would need a breakthrough that's fundamentally a breakthrough of philosophy. It's really give us a whole new way to think about the universe. So long as we sort of live in Turing's world where the way that we solve problems is doing computation.
Yeah.
You were host. And quantum computers don't save you here either. And despite them being a new computational model, they can only provide speed ups. So like the problems that are like too complex to do classically, you might be able to do quantumly in a reasonable amount of time. But problems that are like literally unsolvable by classical computers are still literally unsolvable by quantum computers. Tragically, this is not been a sufficient philosophical realm. Yeah. Despite being like a really, really exciting, like, again, like it is in some ways like a truly interesting philosophical statement that like the universe can do forms of cognition in a sense that we don't think we can do as people. Like that's kind of wild. So like there's cognition that the universe can host that we can't. Yeah. Like,
yeah, it's kind of your people versus, for example, we kind of have people and computers could do something, quantum computers could do some other things. The universe can do things that we can never.
I think maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's this kind of big difference between the worst case and the most of the time situations. It kind of sounds like something that might pop up in general in different areas, that you have a kind of difference of like worst case versus most of the time. Although I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but it's interesting.
Something to think about to viewers.
If you have an example of worst case being very different problem from most
In
of
practice.
the time.
Get in the car.
Yeah. Cool. So we have these metacomplexity problems, which are about figuring out how hard problems about figuring out how hard stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And you have these kind of two worlds. There's a world where metacomplexity problems are difficult.
Yeah, and cryptography exists.
In that world, we have cryptography.
Yeah.
There's a world where metacomplexity problems are mostly solvable.
Yeah.
And in that world, cryptography doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But there's still some worst case metacomplexity problems that have to
no matter what, these problems are hard. They're just, they get into the same like halting problem, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, sad land where things are just impossible. And we have that. This is our life until somebody, and I don't believe, I would be quite surprised if we, like as a species, ever have a philosophical breakthrough sufficient to solve these things. But or we're clever. There's a chance.
Never say never.
Never say never. Yeah.
Cool. And then, so the way that quantum computers fit into this is that they could solve some of these, or that's the way that they...
So there's a variety of different ways that they fit into this picture. So we've already talked a fair amount about one of these ways that they fit into this picture, which is there's specific problems, not metacomplexity problems, but sort of these problems of prime factorization and the discrete logarithm, which quantum computers can solve. And so this sort of takes away some of the ways, so some of these particular methods for doing cryptography. And then the other way that they sort of fit into this world is there's a possibility that quantum computers might be able to help us with metacomplexity problems. That would be really surprising. Metacomplexity problems, in some sense, are like some of the most unstructured problems imaginable. They're very, very chaotic in some very fundamental ways. So it seems very difficult to imagine that would be possible. Quantum computers also introduce sort of some other possibilities here, though. So in that world, if quantum computers were good at metacomplexity, but classical computers weren't, you would live in a world where basically no post-quantum crypto existed.
Right.
Yeah. Because sort of quantum computers could solve these metacomplexity problems, and being able to solve these metacomplexity problems means that you can solve all crypto. You can break all crypto. So you would live in a world where quantum computers can break any crypto that's being done by classical agents, which is sort of, the world that we tend to care about. Although there's like a result that was put out which sort of showed that under some somewhat plausible assumptions that even in that world, there would still be forms of cryptography that were achievable by quantum computers. So this, then gets into this world. So we've talked about post-quantum cryptography. This now introduces these sort of ideas of like properly quantum cryptography, or sort of one sort of category, and then quantum, post-quantum, also called like quantum computing, classical communication cryptography. There's sort of these, we've brought in post-quantum cryptography, now we're bringing in these two other worlds. Two other kinds of cryptography.
So we're imagining this situation where it kind of seems like it's not the case, but it could be the case that quantum computers can solve some metacomplexity problem, which then invalidates any of the post-quantum crypto stuff.
all of
then-
that in this world, all that stuff's gone. It's bad times.
All
Yeah.
is not lost because
All might not be lost.
a solution with this quantum computing,
Yeah,
classical
communication and properly quantum cryptography. So these are sort of two different sorts of things.
Right.
And sort of the way that you sort of move into that world is, back to the situation, we're trying to communicate securely. You, our dear listener, have a quantum computer and are able to listen in, so long as we are running just classical computers. Sort of the world of like quantum computation, classical communication, cryptography is a world in which the two of us also have quantum computers. You do not have an advantage on computation over us, our dear viewer. But in this world, so this is a really, really interesting and exciting world. There's sort of been some very cool results in this. This is an area that I thought about quite a bit. And it turns out that in this setting, sort of there's now, so this problem from before of the same metacomplexity problem, when I call Magora complexity, you switch from, sort of this QCCC, the quantum computation classical cryptography or quantum post-quantum. This kind of cryptography exists if and only if, so we have another one of these characterizations. Metacomplexity is hard for quantum computers when the sort of on average, but this on average is now when it's coming from some quantum source.
What does coming from a quantum source mean?
Yeah, so this means, how to do this without being overly formal? When you're talking about being hard on average, hard or easy on average, you're thinking about on average over some specific distribution. And in the previous settings, we thought about this distribution as being something that a classical computer with access to randomness, they're able to flip coins, that they could sample from. So like this is a distribution that is, sampleable by a computer. In this setting, you'd be, the problem is, if the problem is hard over a distribution sampleable only by a quantum computer.
So you need fundamental quantum hardware to create the distribution that is sampled.
Yes, that is then hard to solve this metacomplexity problem on. Yeah, so if it turns out that there is some quantum sampleable distribution where this problem is hard, then quantum computable classical communication cryptography exists.
Right. So under this condition, it's possible that under this condition there is cryptography that is secure.
Yeah.
Even if post-quantum cryptography is not secure.
Yeah.
And it depends on the people that are communicating
Having quantum computers.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so if we have quantum computers, we're communicating over a classical channel. We can do this in some sense securely, despite them having a quantum computer, even though in this world, if we both had just our normal laptops, we would not be able to communicate securely.
And it has to be a universal quantum computer, or can it be some kind of specialized quantum hardware?
Could be some specialized quantum hardware. Yeah, you could imagine it being something sort of specifically built for this. Yeah.
So kind of in contrast to, situations where someone needs a universal quantum computer to run an algorithm.
Yeah.
In this case, the thing we need access to doesn't necessarily need to be to have power. It just needs to kind of create this particular distribution.
Yeah, basically.
Cool. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard of quantum cryptography, where you're also using quantum systems to get some extra security with cryptography. So could you kind of put it in the context of that a bit, or
for sure. Yeah, so sort of the area of quantum cryptography that gets talked about the most sort of is not this sort of quantum computation, classical communication world. It's sort of what we might call like properly quantum cryptography, or quantum computers and quantum communication. So the classic example of quantum cryptography is the key exchange protocol. And as a complexity theorist, it's wild. Like the fact that this works is wild to me. It's very, very funny for reasons, but I'm not sure capable of explaining quickly. But this is one of those examples of a scheme that works for sure. So this is an unconditional. We talked a lot before about sort of there being conditional and unconditional sort of cryptography, conditional and unconditional results. So key exchange is unconditional. So basically, so long as you're able to set up like, you know, the protocol, like you can physically instantiate the protocol, and you can build all the hardware that you need to move the quantum states around. You can do the measurements that you need to, and people sort of are only able to listen into the parts that you want, that you sort of like is allowed by the definitions in the protocol. Then it works. It's just secure. Like, end of proof. In the same way that like some problems are just completely unsolvable, this sort of like breaking this crypto system is completely unsolvable. You're just out of luck. If you want to break it, what you need to start doing is like embedding malware on the people's computers at the two ends. Like if you're just listening in the middle, and you know that's including listening to the quantum channel that people are sending the information, like the qubits on. You know, you can man in the middle it there. It doesn't help you. You're not going to be able to break the encryption. You're not going to be able to break the guarantee. And sort of what that guarantee is the two of us communicating a mixture, sending quantum and classical signals back and forth. At the end of it, we will have some shared, basically bit of classical randomness, some like shared classical random string that we can then use to do cryptography together. Sort of classical, post-quantum, whatever. It doesn't particularly matter. Once we have that shared key, we're in pretty good shape from a security perspective. And it's a good time. And so this sort of like quantum key distribution is in a lot of ways sort of completely separate from all of these conversations about metacomplexity, these questions about complexity. It's true. It works. It's a beautiful result. Like it's a really, really cool, like wonderful thing about the universe that this is something that we can do. In the classical world, I guess the reason that I find it so hilarious that this is true is in the classical world, key agreement is really hard. Like within the universe of cryptography, like it's the thing that separates the sort of in the 5 worlds that I talked about before. The worlds we talked about, Pessyland being this world where cryptography doesn't exist. There's sort of 2 worlds where cryptography does exist, one called mini-crypt and one called cryptomania. And in mini-crypt, there's some cryptography. It's sort of all the things that are equivalent to one-way functions. It turns out there's a lot of cryptography that exists in this world. It's a very, very like cool, interesting universe, and you can do all sorts of neat things there. Cryptomania is sort of the realm of public key cryptography, essentially, and sort of the ability to basically communicate securely with people that you haven't met before, just sort of sending stuff over the web. And sort of the thing that lives right on the border between, so this is more powerful than anything in mini-crypt, but less powerful than everything else of cryptomania, is key agreement or key exchange. Like this is sort of the thing that gets you into the world of like really sophisticated cryptography. And it turns out that quantumly it just exists. You can just do it. Like it's sort of separate from all of these sort of questions of, you know, okay, what can you reduce to each other? What problems can turn into other problems? How hard are things? It's just, we can do it. This gives it for free. Let's get computation, like, we could do it, but like, we got to rely on all these assumptions, and it's tough, and life's hard. And then physics, just like, we got better at physics. We had like all these breakthroughs, and then suddenly have a good time. Here, you got this one for free.
And where do you see the kind of usefulness of that type of cryptography compared to the
sort of all the other stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing is if you want right now, because we don't have quantum communication channels, like we don't have like undersea cables that can send qubits yet.
We need like entangled particles.
We need entangled particles.
A source of entangled particles to send them to both of us kind of continuously.
Yeah, or at least for a
for
while.
some period.
Yeah. In the best case, it would be continuously. Actually, if we could do sort of continuous, then we could get communication between the two of us that achieves like, once again, gets into this like unconditional world of security where things are just secure. Your host, nobody can listen in. I don't care how much computing power you have. I don't care if you have a quantum computer. The only way you're going to be able to listen, like actually know what we're saying, is if you install malware on our computers. Like, have a bad time. It doesn't even matter if you're the one providing us with our qubit. Like, we can do checks on them to make sure that like they have the properties that we want once we have them on our hands. But even if we're able to just get like 50 or 100 qubits at the beginning and they have the properties we want, we're in quite good shape. The more the better, but so what's it called? So when would you want to use this? I mean, you definitely, it's nice to have in a world where it turns out that post-quantum cryptography doesn't exist, because these are unconditional results. And sort of and it gives you, again, like, this is gold standard for security. This stuff's fantastic. And so the time when you're going to use something like this is if there's two people who want to communicate with each other securely, and can communicate sort of over the internet, but really don't trust any of the current methods, and also are both capable of carrying a suitcase or being delivered. If you carry a suitcase with you, there's reasons to just have like the thing in the suitcase be like a big book of randomness. If we both have a big book of randomness, we can get these sort of unconditional results as well. So it's really like what you really need is to be in a world where you can get delivery of the qubits, but you don't trust the courier. So like, 'cause if you trust the courier, then you just have them send you a big book of randomness. But if there's somebody who can can create these entangled bits, we both can talk to each other over the radio in the clear. But we don't trust the couriers. We don't trust modern cryptography, and we're sort of maximally paranoid. Maximally paranoid, but you can always be more paranoid. But like, this gives you gold standard, like absolutely unbreakable cryptography. If both people can take delivery of their qubits and can communicate sort of across sort of untrusted channels. But we're able to meet up ahead of time.
Right.
Because if you're able to meet up ahead of time, you might just want to have the big, come up with a big book of randomness together, and then take those with you. Although there's also the downside of like, if you have the big book of, what's it called, the big book of randomness, somebody might crack the case open. That gets a little bit trickier if you're cracking the case open and measuring the qubits. There's ways to tell whether the qubits have been measured when you start doing the protocol. So
there's still a bit of extra security. There's a quantum version.
So there's actually, I guess that does give you that actually gives you a solid advantage. Funny, I haven't necessarily thought through all the details on that until just the second. So like, it's actually in a higher level of like top tier security, even if you are able to meet up ahead of time. There's still an advantage over like, your briefcase with your book of randomness, and I'm like, there's an advantage here. Well, that's interesting.
So quantum cryptography is this setting where we have shared quantum systems, so like some entangled pairs of qubits where I have one of them, you have one of them, and we use those as the basis for our cryptography of our messages.
Yeah. And or sort of, so either we start with encrypted, or we start with entangled particles, but also ideally we're in a world where we can send each other particles. Like I can create some quantum state on my end, can send it through the mail or through wires to you and then you can receive it.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's how we would do it nowadays. I mean, I don't know if it's like through the mail, but it's through, you know, highly refrigerated armored stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can transport quantum states between each other.
Yeah.
That's our quantum communication channel.
Yeah.
And yeah, quantum cryptography requires these quantum communication channels, and that achieves this kind of gold standard,
Yeah.
unconditional protection against attacks.
Yeah.
And then there's, by contrast, there's this quantum, post-quantum setting that we've talked about, where between us we only have access to a classical channel. We just send classical messages to each other.
Yeah.
But we each have access to quantum computers.
Yeah.
And we're using those quantum computers as part of our protocol because we're getting we're sampling these distributions and using that as the basis for the cryptography protocol.
Yeah.
And these post-quantum, post-quantum, this setting is something that we could use as protection in a world where post-quantum crypto has been broken.
Yeah.
But we can still be secure.
Yeah. 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 There's a possibility. This is sort of at the top, like properly quantum cryptography, at least, you know, for these use cases, if we're able to send lots and lots of, like have lots of entangled qubits, like absolute security, quantum post-quantum, you know, there's some like plausible assumptions under which this stuff is secure, even in a world where the post-quantum cryptography, which is we don't have, only the adversary has quantum computers, where this stuff, there is no security here anymore. Quantum computers turned out to be very powerful, but you know, only so powerful. And then if they turn out to be just unbelievably powerful, then then not only do we need quantum computers, we need quantum channels as well if we want to do secure communication, which would be a bummer. It'd make it much harder to buy things on Amazon.
Yeah. Have to have like everyone connected by these quantum channels.
Yeah, it would be tough. We'd be motivated. We might do it.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that's like kind of exciting about sort of some of the quantum like hardware areas where people are doing, like, so there's you can do quantum communication, quantum like what's it called, quantum entanglement and things using photons. And you know, photons are exactly what we're sending down these long fiber optics. I think they need to be changed, improved, made more like less noisy for you to be able to do actual like quantum communication over the fiber optics. But it's not outside of the like extreme range of possibility. Like that's this, if we were sufficiently, if we really wanted to buy our stuff on Amazon, this is maybe a hard way to do it, but like, we'd make it happen. Bezos has a lot of money.
That's good to know that it's allowed by the laws of physics for us to create the infrastructure needed for essentially a quantum internet, right? Like when people talk about quantum internet, this is kind of, well, at least part of what it would
that would mean
involve would be a network.
Yeah, that's sort of the main.
Well, I guess that's quantum communication networks. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and so if we, so in sort of, you can also then, I guess, think of this as being like a separate additional motivation for doing less like the like full quantum computers, because you actually don't need a particularly sophisticated piece of like quantum computing hardware to do the measurements and things that you need to do to get to do this key exchange stuff. But it's sort of maybe more of a motivation to get really good quantum channels set up. Because if we were able to get these really, really high quality quantum channels, we would still, I think, use a fair amount of like the post-quantum crypto stuff for a lot of day-to-day things, but it would make it, we might be able to replace a lot of it with these what's it called, with these quantum, with these like gold standard quantum schemes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And do you have an idea for the quantum computers that we'd need for doing the quantum post-quantum?
Yeah, those are
do you have
going to. Yeah, those are more significant. Those, for that you really want you don't necessarily need a universal like fault tolerant high quality quantum computer with lots of qubits, but it would certainly help. It would be so there's sort of one of these quantum supremacy experiments that doing at Google and stuff. What the basic setup is that you're showing you're taking one of these like quantum computers that we have now that are quite noisy. They don't have a ton of qubits. They're not very powerful, but they are now powerful enough that they can sample from some specific distributions that we think classical computers would struggle to.
Mm-hmm.
And you would want to have some like well-motivated reason for not only that sampling from that distribution is going to be hard for a classical computer, but there's going to be but that sort of turns into like this sort of like joint distribution that you can split it, and that sort of going from like one half of a sample to the other half of the sample would be difficult. You need this split property to be able to get the properties that you want and need. There's a chance that like sort of these like you would only need one of these near-term quantum computers that people spent billions of dollars to make. Odds are you would need something stronger because you need there's sort of the specific guarantees that you need about the distribution whose hardness you're relying on. There's sort of specific guarantees that you need about how it's structured, and the sort of hardness associated with it that would be surprising to be able to argue for some of these sort of current distributions.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I don't know. There's I get maybe the most honest answer is I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
There actually is a paper that came out a few months ago that sort of talks about some of these problems, sort of basing the existence of this QCC crypto on some specific sampling problems, but I don't actually know how practical those problems, like how sampleable those distributions are by current quantum computers. If the answer is that they are, then actually the things that we already built might be sufficient, which would be exciting. That'd be quite neat.
Yeah. So thinking along these lines, kind of, whether it's in the near term or in the long run, do you see a case for basing at least in some situations, actually using this for cryptography, even if post-quantum hasn't been broken out of like fear that it could be, or as like a protection for in case it
that's not implausible. I sort of swing back and forth about how much I believe learning with errors is secure. There's a related problem called learning parity with noise that, for complicated reasons, I tend to think of as being like a slightly better bet. But both of these are they're very similar problems, and sort of, I don't know, in some ways it would be hard to imagine one being hard without the other one being hard. That's not a particularly, like, I don't think proofs showing an equivalence between these two, but sort of baseline philosophically, the kind of thing that's going on with them is very similar. And I sort of swing back and forth between, are these secure or not? Last spring, around the same time that the Learning with Errors paper came out, me and some collaborators had what we thought was an approach for breaking these. It turned out not to work. It was very, very exciting.
Yeah.
It didn't end up working. It was based on some cool techniques to improve complexity, and we ran into some issues, some pretty fundamental issues. Like I don't think these tools are likely to give you anything, although you never know. So yeah, I think if you end up in a place where you are sort of personally, philosophically doubtful about these post-quantum crypto assumptions, which have not been around as long as the classical crypto assumptions, in particular, the sort of proof of hardness by nobody solved them yet is not like as strong. And closely relatedly, like there's people who work in quantum algorithms, but it's not a huge community. There's a lot more people who know how to write programs for classical computers than people who know how to write programs for quantum computers. We just actually haven't spent that many years thinking that hard about what we can do with the paradigm. So if you find yourself being like a real optimist about the power of quantum computers, then sort of starting to doubt some of these post-quantum assumptions is reasonable. Like I don't know, there's reason to believe they're hard, but then those reasons aren't overwhelming, and they certainly aren't proofs that these problems are hard. And if you are in that world, then starting to think seriously about, okay, can I leverage sort of the power of these like quantum computing, classical communication, or properly quantum cryptography settings? These start to become like really worth thinking about. Particularly like if by the time we get quantum computers that are good enough to start really smashing the current crypto assumptions and even the post-quantum crypto assumptions, by that point we probably have the engineering necessary to really start thinking about doing these other settings as well.
Yeah. Kind of like, if we have a quantum computer that can solve Shor's algorithm, then we also have one that can can get us around the issues that come from Shor's algorithm being applicable. Yeah, this is the hope. Yeah. Although this is a really, really quickly evolving field. This is one of the things that's like very exciting about being like me right now, is the sort of the field of properly quantum cryptography almost didn't exist 5 years ago, and is now like, there's so much cool work that's coming out in the area. There's all sorts of like fascinating stuff. It's very, very funny. Like again, like, and I think pseudorandom state generators were like defined only like in like 2018, 2019. So it's like 6-7 years ago. And that was like the first, I sort of talked before about like thinking about sort of like these abstractions of like crypto systems. So like sort of abstracting into secret key encryption. Pseudorandom state generators are one of these abstract ideas for a quantum crypto primitive. And that was like one of the first ones to be proposed. And now there's like 20 or 30 of these things, and we have all of these cool reductions between them, and we know all these things about the field. And now we're starting to connect it more fully to questions in complexity theory and all of this stuff. So it's very exciting, and in another 5 to 10 years, maybe around the time that quantum computers, I don't want to make predictions about when quantum computers are going to start being able to break things about their own. But by that time, it seems likely that we're going to have a much clearer answer of, okay, in this world where quantum computers are able to break a lot of cryptography, what new cryptography can we do using quantum computers? Yeah, cool. And so do you see this kind of community and area of research that's very new? Do you think it'll kind of be expanding quite a lot? Like there's still a lot to discover and figure out. And there's sort of like really fundamental debates and fundamental questions that we don't have answers for yet. Like sort of like a basic question like, what is the minimal quantum crypto assumption? We don't know. Like in the classical world, like the minimal classical crypto assumption is something called the one-way function.
And this is a very, very basic mathematical object. It's some sort of mathematical function that's easy to compute but hard to invert. So going from x to f of x is computationally feasible, but going from f of x and getting back to x is hard. So if there are functions that are like this, then you can do all sorts of cryptography, and the metacomplexity problems that I care about are hard. But sort of what is, and sort of like, basically if any cryptography, any interesting cryptography exists, then one-way functions exist, sort of classically. In the world, once you throw quantum computers into the mix, sort of saying, okay, what is the minimal assumption for all of quantum cryptography? We have some candidates, and we know something about how they relate to each other, but we don't have a definitive answer. We don't know.
Right, so we don't know the kind of minimum condition that you can base quantum cryptography on in the way that we do for classical.
Yeah. Sort of, again, in some sense, the true minimal assumption is the stuff that we know works for sure. But sort of, so when we're thinking about minimal assumptions, the assumption that it still is an assumption as opposed to just being true. So this is something like sort of something that can fuel conditional results. Sort of like, if this thing that we're not sure about, then we get all of this other stuff. So what is the smallest, least powerful thing that we can fit into that if when we're thinking about like quantum cryptography? And this would be an if where sort of, all the other things that we could slot in there imply the first thing. So it's just like, it's the A such that all of our if B's then A. So we just, so stick A in there. What can we get from just A without sort of all of these other things?
Great.
And we don't know. We don't know what that is, and we don't know what we can get from it. Like we're still quite unsure. And sort of unlike in the classical case, the picture that's starting to clear up now looks like our candidates for minimal assumption are actually shockingly weak. Like they don't give us that much besides themselves. In the classical setting, if you have one-way functions, which is this like really puny little object, it turns out to be equivalent to like symmetric key cryptography. Like so long as we sort of, for instance, do like one of these quantum key exchange things. So we have some shared key. Using that shared key and just the existence of one-way functions, we can build a protocol that allows us to communicate securely. In the classical setting, it seems like the current candidates, these EFIs, people have debates about one-way puzzles. It seems like EFIs mostly just give you something called bit commitment. Like that's almost sort of definitional to what they are. And so, it's a very interesting, new, weird domain where like a lot of our classical intuitions don't help us. Like really, in some cases, really don't help us. Like these things don't. Some things sort of move in nice and clean, like sort of they act like they do in the classical world, and a lot of things work totally differently. And it's quite surprising.
So you kind of have to rebuild the field for the quantum
case. Yeah.
Cool. And could you maybe give us a flavor of what the problems are that you've been particularly interested in your research, or
so the
are still interested in?
So the questions that I've been most interested in is understanding sort of these minimal quantum crypto primitives and these minimal sort of quantum post-quantum crypto primitives and the relationship with metacomplexity. So sort of some of those results have been sort of, we proved some things about one of the early candidates for a minimal assumption, something called the one-way state generator. We proved a couple things about those. We've proved some things about another candidate for minimal assumption called one-way puzzles. And after sort of proving those things about it, we sort of built up the techniques necessary for proving one of these metacomplexity characterizations. We were able to show that one-way puzzles, which are sort of a fundamental like quantum computing, classical communications primitive, we showed that their existence is equivalent, sort of the equivalence that I mentioned before is equivalent to the hardness of Kolmogorov complexity on quantum sampleable distributions. So that was a result that we proved like this last summer. It was a funny time. There was a couple other groups that proved it more or less at the same time as us.
Oh, right. One of these strange situations where it all converges. And
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, there's a chance. I don't know necessarily. One of the groups, there's a chance that they had also independently proved the sort of precursor results that you needed to get to this characterization. But what happened was sort of in last spring, me and one of my collaborators put out a paper, and in it proved one-way puzzles are equivalent to something called distributional one-way puzzles. But that sort of having that result made it possible for you, like sort of you can really leverage that result to show the characterization. Like it made up a very key feature of all of the proofs of the characterization, even though people took somewhat different routes to get to the characterization. This sort of was the key ingredient. And so there was a little bit of like somebody throws out a new tool, everybody jumps on it to see what it can use it for. And this sort of was like the major thing that people could use it for. It's cool, neat, interesting. And then looking at other things that we can characterize, sort of if one-way puzzles don't exist, what else would we get? It turns out that you sort of get some, you potentially are able to show some other interesting things about metacomplexity. So that's sort of been the main thrust of my research, and particularly sort of in this area, trying to understand, okay, what are the minimal quantum crypto primitives? How do they relate to each other? What are their properties? And how do they relate to metacomplexity? This is sort of in the key work.
Cool. Yeah. So you're kind of building up these foundations of the new area of the quantum, post-quantum, crypto and metacomplexity work, which has all these unknowns compared to classical, which has been kind of well studied for a long time. Yeah,
although actually, hilariously, the metacomplexity characterizations for even classical cryptography, a lot of these were quite recent. Like these sort of the work really started in also in the late 2010s. So
that's also a recent.
It's also a recent phenomenon, and very exciting and interesting. And similarly, there's a lot of the really cool work around metacomplexity, cryptography, and machine learning is also again quite recent. I think the Pessyland is a Wonderland for Learning paper came out only a few years ago. It's a I don't know. It's funny. The complexity theory tends to be a world in which the big problems of complexity theory are all at least 50 years old. The really big ones. So it's kind of funny to be in a zone of complexity theory where things are moving much quicker. But I did choose that area on purpose because it seemed exciting. It's worthwhile to spend some time on problems that haven't been solved in 50 years, but you do need to get papers out the door.
And these areas where they have momentum, stuff is happening, and
and there's more of a possibility of you being able to make a real contribution.
Cool. Yes, nice that there's fresh things happening both on the classical and quantum side, kind of at the same time.
It's really cool, and it allows these things to talk back and forth at least a bit.
Cool. So we've covered a lot. I'd like to wrap up soon, but I have a couple more questions.
For sure.
One is that, so we talked about how introducing quantum mechanics kind of led to these new, we can use quantum channels to do unconditional quantum cryptographic protocol where the physics kind of gives us something for free. And I don't know if you'll have an answer to this, but I was just kind of wondering, can you imagine, or have you ever thought about if there's some new physics, post-quantum physics, post-quantum gravity or something? Could you imagine that giving us some new unconditional nice things?
No, totally.
Should we worry about what that could do? Or
Yeah,
does
I mean,
anyone worry about that?
so I don't think people spend much time worrying about that. I did see that there was a paper that came out. I don't think it was published anywhere like super official. I think somebody just posted it on an archive, but I could be wrong. Maybe it got accepted somewhere nice. That gave a model for a quantum gravity computer that was able to solve, like it was sort of able to solve even more problems and do even more cool things. But sort of the two things are, we need genuinely new physics, and then we need engineering to catch up to the point where we can take advantage of that physics. But there's every possibility that there's new interesting fundamental physics out there and that we can manipulate and use to our advantage. And there's like some very silly examples of doing computation where either you throw yourself or you throw the computer towards a black hole and sort of get up to shenanigans and things. And like these things tend not to give you actually that much advantage, but I mean, there is the benefit of, throw yourself close to the black hole, but not close enough that you get trapped forever. And then time dilation, by the time you hop back out, your computation's done. I don't know, there might be things like that. But yeah, so the basic answer is, I don't think you should be worried about it, because it took us a long time to get from quantum mechanics being introduced to quantum mechanics sort of being thought about for computational applications to us being able to engineer anything about it. So we're still probably, even if somebody came up with the physics today, we're still probably about 100 years out. But maybe not, I don't know. It depends on the physics, right? It depends on like how much we're able to like engineer based on the physics and how quickly. But yeah, that's one of the things that's like a very exciting possibility about the universe. It's sort of this, I mean, I don't know, this is getting, I guess, a little bit into sort of more philosophy of physics, but we just sort of keep coming up with these theories that allow us to make more and better predictions, but that doesn't preclude the possibility of there being deeper theories that sort of, our current theories are special cases of the more general theory or the deeper theory. And if those deeper theories then allow us to influence the universe and sort of create situations in the universe, there's absolutely no reason to believe that like we couldn't come up that we couldn't come up with new physics that gives us new engineering, that gives us new computation. Again, there is reason to believe that it shouldn't allow you to do anything. You still shouldn't be able to solve the halting problem without a breakthrough that's more on the philosophy side as opposed to on the physics side. But like, I don't know, I guess you could be like, hey, we figured out that some particle in some situation breaks the halting problem for some reason. I don't know. I can't come up with a reason that's impossible. But like, that would be, especially that being true without any deeper reason for that. That would, I feel like, be like, I wouldn't really know how to interpret that. That feels like evidence for we live in a simulation and someone's screwing with us. But just like, what? How? Like, it's just like, this is a phenomenon. This is how muons work. I don't know.
It's like, we can't comprehend how this works, so someone must be messing with it.
Like, I thought maybe that's a leap to make. Like, that's not necessarily particularly sound, but I don't know. I would find that to be very, very, very funny and entertaining.
Yeah, I do think about that sometimes, like how absurd and difficult to understand what things have to get for us to think like, maybe I'm in a simulation and someone's messing with me.
I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that either. I think, I think pretty weird. But I feel like there is a bar, right? like there is at some point you start seeing things where it is like the odds of you seeing something like this subjectively seem a lot higher if there's somebody screwing with you than if there isn't someone screwing with you. Like just from like other situations.
Cool. So kind of going from that very I guess big picture, long-term new physics thinking back to kind of the problems that are kind of practically people are thinking about today.
Yeah.
When I talk to people about quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography,
Yeah.
what I usually say is kind of we have some post-quantum cryptographic protocols that we can transition to, and people are trying to transition to them, but there's a trade-off because
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources you need to put in to actually make that transition from crypto systems that we're using now to implementing post-quantum cryptography, and they have their own inefficiencies and difficulty of implementation. And there's also this risk of they're kind of newer and less tested through time.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to switch to something that then it turns out even a classical computer can actually break it. And you've just made your security worse because even a classical computer can break it. And we don't have the quantum computers that can break it yet. So, so I'm kind of interested in what your feeling on that landscape is. Like, how confident do you feel about how ready we are to shift into post-quantum? And is it like something that needs loads more work as a community, or are we kind of in reasonable shape for using it?
I would like us to be in better shape, I think, is the short version. Just on the I would feel better about the post-quantum crypto assumptions if more people knew how to write quantum programs and had been thinking about it. Again, like the reason we ultimately really think that these sort of classical crypto problems are hard is because a lot of people who understand how to, who could have written algorithms to break it have thought about it, and none of them have been able to do it. And this includes like a giant world of hobbyists who are just like normal computer programmers, not serious academics, not people who particularly specialize in this. But we're leaning to some extent on thousands, millions of people around the world who could have a burst of late night inspiration because they have enough background to understand sort of the basics of what's going on. In the quantum, for these post-quantum crypto assumptions, particularly if we're thinking about them being actually post-quantum secure, we don't really know. We just, at the very least, we can't rely on that same sort of epistemic weight. There just aren't that many people who know how to write quantum algorithms. I don't even really write quantum algorithms in my actual work. That's not really the piece of quantum computing where I tend to spend my time. And more and more people are learning how to write quantum algorithms every day. There's all of these quantum programming languages that are being created in quantum architectures that people are coming up with, and it's this problem is getting better every day, which is very exciting. But for us to really trust that these things are in fact post-quantum secure, I think, to me, there's just a level of time and attention and how much of the human population is able to think about this. I'm more confident that these things are classically secure, although I'm still, not 100% convinced. You know what I mean? In the same way that I'm not 100% convinced of the classical crypto systems being classically secure either. It's possible. I think I might even be less surprised if it turns out that I don't know, maybe I'm 50-50. But if prime factorization turned out to be classically easy versus learning with errors turned out to be classically easy, both of those seem equally plausible, but both quite implausible. Both of those would be very surprising.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All of that's to say, I think if I was in a situation, if I was somebody who was building a crypto system where I was concerned about post-quantum security, which was a very reasonable thing to do, and I was this is worth really sinking resources into it, both in terms of engineering time and what's it called? Like computing power, because these post-quantum crypto systems, a fair number of them, like by and large, they tend to be a little bit more cumbersome to run on your computer than something like RSA. I would belt and suspenders it, like, because you can run two crypto systems on top of each other. Like you can have something that is secured with learning with errors, and then you take your message, you lock it inside of a learning with errors shaped box, and then you lock it inside of a RSA shaped box, and then you send it down, and then the person decrypts it twice. And this is quite a bit more work, sort of computationally on the encryption side, or like the encryption and decryption side of things than we're currently doing. But like, I don't know. We got supercomputers in our pockets. Like they can run the programs. Like this is not more cumbersome is not wildly cumbersome.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that like the EU has now put out some like recommended post-quantum crypto systems and protocols, and I think like there's implementations for these. So like absolutely use like. There are situations in which you want to build your own crypto systems, especially if you're really, really concerned about efficiency. Like, but there's sort of a general rule of don't roll your own crypto. Like, go use the libraries that other people have built that you can be quite confident are built correctly.
Yeah.
Although there's also something to be said for then you're sort of there's a single point of failure, and if people have sort of managed to sort of install backdoors into the sort of standardized library, then bad times. But it's also then it provides a single point of everybody looking at to make sure that there isn't any screwery hidden inside of it. So yeah, I think sort of my very practical recommendation would be use both. Like you don't have to give up on the previous system when using the new system. You get different like levels of like different kinds of guarantees from both. I think there's some ring learning with errors based techniques. I don't know if those have been sort of standardized yet in this sort of way that are on the fairly reasonably efficient side of things. And there's a level of like, we hope that things are secure, but we have no guarantees about any cryptography.
Yeah.
Right? Like end of the day, we could live in a world where all crypto is broken, where metacomplexity is easy, where I have a fun time, and you can do machine learning for days. Like there's a chance we live in that world, and we just it's sort of one of these big mathematical mysteries that we just don't know the answer to. But I think sort of living in the practical world where we have to make decisions even in the face of that sort of uncertainty. Yeah, use both.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so if you use both, then you've got the RSA, which has withstood the test of time for classical attacks.
Yeah.
You've got the learning with errors, which is thought to be secure against quantum attacks.
Yeah.
And classical, but even if it turns out there's some classical way of breaking it, you've still got the one that's
has stood the test
of time.
Yeah.
And then there's the potential issue of the much more unexplored area of quantum attacks coming along, since there's not been that much work in quantum algorithms.
Yeah, with like there's a lot of really smart people in that world who are doing interesting work. It's just not comparable to 50 years of like amateur programmers, and like we're sort of like everybody in the world who knows how to write a Python script. Like that's just a lot of people, and a lot of them have heard about prime factorization, and a lot of those people have thought about it for 5 minutes, and and sort of on and on. Like there's sort of some fall off of like number of people and amount of intellectual attention that this problem has gotten, and like take the integral of this area, and it's a lot of attention that has been paid to this problem, and so like that's something that you can. It's not a proof, but it's evidence. Yeah, and so you don't want to throw that out, at least yet.
Yeah.
And so especially in this world where like quantum computers don't exist yet, and even when we start building ones that can actually do things that we care about, it's unlikely that your neighbor is going to have one. Like for the first like decade or so of these things existing, Yeah, yeah. So, we've lived in this, so even for the first like decade or so of quantum computers existing, they're still probably mostly going to be owned by a handful of nation states and a handful of giant tech companies. Like there's going to be like, 2 to 10 to 20 to 30. And so you're not going to be in a situation where like you're that worried about them sort of using that quantum computer to break your RSA. So, like it's worth having that extra bit of security because most of your practical adversaries still won't be able to break the RSA anyway. So, worth hanging on to both of the guarantees so long as like you're in a situation where you are genuinely concerned about this and, the computational overhead isn't too onerous, which it generally shouldn't be.
Fully. Cool. Yeah. Great. So maybe we can just kind of wrap up by can just do a little recap of what we've covered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we covered a lot, but just to kind of give some idea. So your work is kind of about this intersection of quantum computing, complexity theory, and cryptography.
Yeah.
And we've talked about all these different ways that these interact in that there's, in terms of cryptography, there's the issue that quantum computers could break our widely used methods of cryptography. Then there's post-quantum cryptography, that is cryptography which just uses classical computers and is meant to be secure against quantum attacks from quantum computers.
Yeah.
And then there's quantum, post-quantum cryptography, which is when we're sending messages, we have access to quantum computers.
Yeah.
We use classical communication.
Yeah.
And that's even stronger than the post-quantum, because even if post-quantum is vulnerable to attacks from quantum computers, this type of cryptography can still be protected against those attacks.
Yeah. This is still sort of one of these like based on certain assumptions, sort of like, but sort of there's some reasonable set of assumptions under which like you live in a world where post-quantum crypto doesn't exist, but this kind of crypto does. Yeah.
And then there's this kind of gold standard world where we have a quantum channel and then we can do this kind of very unconditionally secure quantum cryptography, but that would need this full-on quantum channel infrastructure, which is kind of...
Yeah, and that's an additional challenge. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist. I don't necessarily understand how much harder the problem of making quantum computers versus the problem of making like robust out there in the universe quantum channels that we can use all the time. I don't know which of these is harder, and I don't know the trade-offs between them. But like this is what's sort of required for that. But it could give some really, really great guarantees. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then the other area that we discussed is how these metacomplexity problems come in. Yeah. And these are problems that are about the hardness of solving a hard problem.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of metacomplexity problems are problems about the hardness of other problems. And then you're interested in the hardness of the metacomplexity problems. And that's when you're doing metacomplexity.
Yeah. So we to get that straight. I think I've got it. Yeah. And then you talked about this equivalence where a world where we can solve most of the metacomplexity problems is one where we can break cryptography.
Yeah.
Which is actually really cool because we could do loads of interesting things in that world.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, obviously we've covered a lot more than that, but
this is the main outline and the sort of the structure of it all. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that was really interesting. Thanks for telling me and us and our audience all about your work and your interest in these areas. It's given me a much better view of the whole landscape of quantum and cryptography and where quantum computers fit in with everything and these kind of near-term and very long-term considerations and how that all fits together.
Awesome. I'm glad I was able to give you that. I hope it was helpful for you, and I hope it's helpful for all of you back home.
Great. And is there anything any final words you'd like to highlight for our audience?
Maybe. I don't know. I think the thing that I sort of drew me to all of this originally is this philosophical thing of we share more in common with the computers than we do with the quantum computers. They're this sort of fundamentally new thing, this fundamentally new way of sort of getting the world to do computation and cognition for us. And I want more people to understand and to be thinking about what we can do with this new method of computation, this new way of seeing the world, and this new way of like trying to discover the world. In part because it will, start maybe answering questions about, then we have more people attacking things like learning with errors. But we also just have more people engaging with this wondrous, beautiful, strange new thing that we still don't really understand. That's my pitch for going into quantum computing instead of quantum physics or the rest of quantum foundations. Come work in my field.
Nice. Well, hopefully many of you have had your interest piqued enough by this podcast to want to join the field of quantum computing.
Awesome.
Great.
Hope to see you here.
Yeah. See you next time on the Quantum Foundations podcast. Thanks for joining us, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah. Bye.
Hello.
Hello. This is the first ever trial of the new audio setup, so we want to check that it's sounding good.
Hello. My name is Matthew Gray. Blah, 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 blah.